Let's talk about one of the more complicated connectives. This connective is called the conditional. And sometimes it's called the if, then. The symbol for this is written this way. Again, it takes two inputs, so I've got a P, I've got an arrow pointing to the right, and then a Q, and this is read if P, then Q. This is called the conditional because there's some condition here that if it's met, it guarantees the second part. Little more terminology with this one. The first part of a conditional statement is called the antecedent. The second part of a conditional statement is called the consequent. There are a ton of ways of expressing if-then statements. Because English is such a robust language, we have a ton of different ways of saying this. I'm going to stick with P and Q, but I'm going to use then regular sentences or regular words around them to write them out. So if P, then Q is symbolized as if P, then Q. Okay, that's our basic one. That's how that will normally look. Similarly, I can put a comma there. And sometimes when I have more complicated expressions, I'll need a comma to separate things. A comma can be used to break up sentences and let me know what things are grouped together. So that comma can be helpful there. This can be if P, Q. Wow, I did not write the word if. Too busy looking at my piece of paper. If P, Q is sometimes how the sentence will look. But again, that's if P, then Q. It's expressed the same. Sometimes I'll say, well, I won't, but someone who wants you to translate will say Q if P. Okay, they'll put that consequent first, but then they'll use the word if and say P. This is still if P, then Q. This is one to look out for. And it's one to look out for because in the sentence, the values are, or the simple statements are switched in the order that they will end up. All right. Sometimes I will say Q is necessary for P. Okay, if something is necessary, it's actually the consequent. So Q is necessary for P is actually written or symbolized as if P, then Q. Again, that's one to look out for because it looks backward. When I look at the statement, Q is necessary for P, that's actually going to be symbolized if P, then Q. Okay, let me get back to a black marker here. P is sufficient for Q. This one's back to if P, then Q, or being symbolized as if P, then Q. So that one's nice and normal. P, oops, wrong color. P only if Q. Now you see that word if in there, but when it has only by it, this stays in the same order. Okay, P only if Q is the same as if P then Q. And one more. Only if Q P. Okay, again, that only if comes right before my consequent, so this is also symbolized if P then Q. Okay, here are a lot of different ways of a lot of different statements that are all symbolized if P then Q. This is tricky, so let me see if I can give you a little visual aid. This is what I think of. So I have antecedent, and then an arrow. Then we have the consequent. Okay, I like to put only if here over the arrow, because if I have an only if, that says the consequence is going to come right after it. And then also, things that are sufficient come before the arrow, things that are necessary come after the arrow. Okay, if I can keep this little picture in my head, it'll really help me when I'm trying to symbolize if-then statements or conditional statements.